My name is Bradley Harrod. I'm coordinating this webinar. My role is Product Marketing Manager at Exponential-e. I'm here today to introduce a cybersecurity webinar, part of the Digital 30 webinar series. Today with me I've got Jeff Finch and Pedro Aquino. Pedro is from the CSOC, and he leads a team of engineers in the CSOC, and he'll be here to explain some of how that team is built and the monitoring services around that. Jeff, as a accredited product manager for cybersecurity, is highly skilled in a wide range of technologies and has a vast experience through the telecommunications, managed service providers, and IT industry for security practices. The topic of this webinar today is taking the complexity out of cyber. Here we are. Sorry, here we go. Taking the complexity out of monitoring, security, and compliance. The main focus of this will be compliance and monitoring. Monitoring is increasingly a key part of cybersecurity management and risk. So I'll go into the agenda here. What we'll be covering today in this webinar, we'll examine the challenge of maintaining and monitoring your operations, some of the headaches around security compliance standards, and actually managing your risk and ongoing activity across your network. We'll highlight why compliance is so important and go into a bit more detail there, but actually relate it to cybersecurity and technology, how the two are actually very closely related. The challenges around managing this and the options, what you can do in the stages to improving your cybersecurity in terms of monitoring compliance. And we'll explain how we're doing it and how we're helping some of our customers, and the detail around those deployment options. So a bit about compliance. Actually, from the SANS Institute, the research shows that protection of sensitive data and compliance are really high on spending priorities for businesses. There's a range of regulations, and protecting sensitive data is key across a range of industries. So organizations, financial, banking, charity organizations, they're all closely keeping their eye on how we manage data and the different systems that manage this data, but also implementing the regulations for their specific industry and keeping hold of customer data. So there's a key relation to technology, because actually other research has shown that only 25% of compliance and governance can actually be covered by technology. So a lot of it is covered by people and processes, which leads me on to introduce Jeff and the topic of the comparison between technology, compliance, and how they're related and complementary to each other.
Thank you, Bradley. So increasingly, people tend to look at compliance and technology as two different things, and as Bradley's alluded to, you know, they're very much joined at the hip. The trouble is that in the board member, the C-level type view, that connection between those two things seems to be lost and sometimes very difficult to justify. The C-level board members, they want to have the compliance because they know that it makes them look good in terms of their customers and the type of business that they want to attract to themselves. And on the other side, we have the need technologically to be able to protect the environment and keep it safe and keep information and the intellectual property of an organization safe from harm. But when you look at compliance, it's interesting how few people really understand the driver that sits there, and increasingly we are going to see in the marketplace the growth of that driver. Things like GDPR, and I'm not going to go into that in length, because at the moment it actually doesn't have a compliance standard, but also the needs of our industries such as PCI DSS, and the needs of being able to do business even at a low level with government such as Cyber Essentials Plus, mean that we have to be able to understand what part of our estate is within scope of that compliance standard, and we need to understand how technology can assist us in completing that compliance. And Bradley was right in something that he said earlier as well, which is like, it's not just about technology, it's about people, process, and technology. And technology really is there to enable the activity of the people and the process. So when we look at the technology piece, it becomes, right, okay, we need to protect ourselves because that's just the way the world is now. You know, the internet that we all use as a ubiquitous platform for connectivity, you know, is a dangerous place. People are on there and they're keen to actually attract information from your environment so that they can sell it and make profit from it. So technologically, we need to be able to protect it. And our compliance makes sure that that technology does it to the standard that we want to be able to display externally. And from a compliance point of view, what you find within businesses is it's very often viewed that compliance is about a lot of time taken to be able to reach compliance standard, and it increases the complexity of an organization because they have to think forward to find the process to protect themselves rather than waiting for the event to occur. When people look at technology, they very often look at it as a time saver, as a way of simplification, as a way of making it easier to do their job. Compliance pushes us towards adhering to a regulation, a standard, something that we can absolutely attest to with our client base. But it comes at a cost, and the cost is sometimes not something that organizations can accept. So technology, on the other hand, once it's been spent, the money seems to be thought of at a board level as being something that should reduce over time. But in actual fact, to maintain compliance, that's the last thing that's going to happen. What's going to happen is that cost is going to be maintained to a degree. So compliance and technology should work together to make this happen. And they should work together because compliance provides the opportunities and the customers that will grow profits for organizations, and technologies will save and keep secure the transactions and add to the customer credibility in that model.
So Jeff, actually there's a sweet spot between compliance and technology, in the sense that technology can only go so far to defend and defend against advanced risks and protect your vulnerabilities, but compliance brings in processes, people and governance to identify what's being done on an ongoing level from the beginning. And at the center of that, I see is strategy, in the sense that both are closely related to business strategy and organization strategy, but they both complement it in different ways, and they're quite complementary. Okay.
So if you look at, so let's use an example, because that's probably the easiest way to do this, right? Okay. So if we look at something like PCI DSS, okay? PCI DSS, for the devices that are within scope and the network that's within scope, in terms of protecting cardholder data, is very clear about the segmentation of that data away from any other data that's in the enterprise. It's very clear about how that's delivered, and it's very clear about how that data is anonymized so that it can be kept secure. Now, all of those things are mechanical, technical processes, if you like, yeah? They're not about people and process. They're actually about how we make traffic go from point A to point B, how we keep traffic at point B secure and disassociated and anonymized from the traffic that might be going to point A. Because when we store that data, what we don't want to do is store it all in the same place, yeah? We need to be able to split that data and using the terms of our good friends in the EU who created GDPR, we're going to go through some sort of pseudonymization of that data to make sure that we can pull it together when we need to in terms of the transaction, but in terms of storage, in terms of maintenance, in terms of the compliance standard, we have to keep it entirely separated, okay? But PCI DSS calls on us to be able to prove that. So the process that underpins that is all about our ability at a snapshot point in time to be able to provide the evidence that we have moved that data in that way and we have anonymized that data in that way, okay? Now, there are processes to test that that would be the case, yeah? And we won't go through those processes now, but the point is that's the process piece, yeah?
Right.
So there is a technological construction of that environment to make that occur, but there is a process behind it that says how that will occur. In other words, where do we put that data? And there will be another process behind that about how do we prove that we did that, yeah? And there has to be an auditable path in both technology and with the people and the processes, okay?
Okay. So let's take that further, and perhaps we could go into what that might look like.
So what the picture that you've got in front of you now is really, you know, the archetypal headache for everybody if they're trying to do any type of standard, right? So, you know, let's forget the complex standards for the moment. Let's pick on something really, really easy. So if we were doing something like Cyber Essentials Plus, even this network causes headaches. And it causes headaches because we have a number of network points that are going across the internet and then coming back to a centralized point. So we have Office 3 network, Office 2 network, and then we have the, let's call that the head office that's there with the two, with the high availability firewalls there, and its wireless network, its internal office network, and its DMZ sat off of one of those HA firewalls. Now, the problem with this is that for us to be able to observe what's happening here and to be able to attest that we are doing all the right things with this network, it becomes really, really difficult. And it's really, really difficult because I've got to log into each one of those routers on the Office 3 networks and the Office 2 networks to see what's going on. I've got to, if I want to observe what's happening with the traffic there, I've then got to further log into any distributed services to be able to see any anomalies that I might come across. When it comes to the main head office network, I've got not only my wired network to worry about, but also my wireless network, which means that I've then got two different platforms that I've got to log into if I want to see what's happening with traffic there. Although, you know, clearly that traffic will ultimately go through the firewall. But the main point here is that we still have to be able to access various devices to get information. And when it comes to my DMZ network, then I'm going to have to securely log into each one of those servers that's externally facing to be able to see what their status is and how they're operating. So where I am at the moment is I'm playing detective with this network all the time. If I want to check anything out, if somebody comes to me and says, can you prove that you are Cyber Essentials Plus, I would actually have to do a full audit of my own environment to come back to them and say, yes, I am. Yeah. Now, that's a real headache because let's take simple things. Say on that DMZ network, one of those that web server there actually was the way that I did my business. And that server behind it is actually an e-commerce server. And that web server is taking transactions that's passing to the e-commerce server for completion. Now, that comes under a DDoS attack. What's that going to look like to me? How am I going to know that I'm under attack? How am I going to know that somebody's port scanning those devices? How will I know exactly what's occurring there without actually having a live link to those devices and those platforms and those operating systems to be able to pick up that information? And that's the technological headache. That's the issue. The issue is, how can you see all of this stuff in one place to be able to make informed decisions as to how you control and maintain it?
Okay.
So let's drill down on that a little bit more. So, so you've advertised to your customers that you're ISO 27001. Okay. So how do you know that on any given day that you're up to that standard? And the only way you can get to know that is to log into all the devices, see the status of the network, see how all the devices and the applications that you've got out there are behaving. And the assumption is that if you had a big customer who said, I actually want to audit you to make sure that you are ISO 27001 like you say you are, and this does occur in the commercial world, you would really be saying, yeah, okay, and then hiding your crossed fingers behind your back, because you'd never be really, really sure. So then you get to the point of like, well, who's going to prove that you're up to that compliance standard? So that's going to have to be somebody who's a certified tester of some description. They're going to come on board, do penetration testing. They're going to be intrusive in your office environment by sitting down and doing internal testing as to how far they can get through your applications, etc. And in terms of when we declare our compliance standard, at the moment, we do it on a snapshot of once a year. So as soon as I stick a server in that environment, I've actually broken that compliance standard. I've taken it away from the baseline that's already been tested. And what about my customers? How do I know that the access that I'm giving them is not being abused? Let's be honest, the people we employ may not necessarily be as innocent as we think that they are. So the question really is, so what are the options that are available to you if you want to maintain a compliance standard and you have a distributed network environment? And the answer is like, you can do it yourself. And that really means that you're going to have to, buy some software that's going to be able to do the monitoring and the aggregation and the understanding in an automated way or a semi-automated way of the logs that you get off of those various devices. And then you're going to have to find the right people that are going to be able to understand what that information means when they see it. And the biggest problem that you'll have with that is, one, they're costly, and two, they get bored real quick. The unfortunate part about most security people is they've got very short spans of attention, and they're used to being challenged on a regular basis. So if they don't see those challenges, then it becomes very difficult to keep them engaged. And you can look at alerting and monitoring of various managed services. And some of those are okay, and they do what you need them to do. So they're very light. They're more like a security incident monitoring rather than what we call a security incident event monitoring type platform. They can do certain things, but they don't give a fully rounded view of your estate. And they are challenged when it comes to being able to detect more than just the simplest of anomalous behavior. So for instance, if you have a machine that for whatever reason keeps trying to log into a particular service, and that service is continually unavailable, that would actually look to that alerting and monitoring managed service as some kind of an attack going on. But in actual fact, it might just be that credentials were not fully completed and the device is trying to complete a call that was made to it from some time ago. And more importantly, being able to identify the correct device is not always available on simple alerting and monitoring services. So what if someone could do this for me? And the questions really then become, how much time would it free up? And how much effort would it save you? And in terms of being able to refocus on other priorities? And what other values could you add to the enterprise if you weren't in a position of having to keep time to keep looking at that environment? So here at Exponential-e, we've been working on deploying and providing CSOC services. So our Cybersecurity Operations Center is a manned 24/7, 365 service that allows us to be able to deploy a device in an environment, collect from all of the devices that are within it, log information, which we are then able to correlate, manipulate, and review to be able to understand any sort of incidents, breaches, or problems based upon a customer-based priority list, and be able to offer advice to our customers on how they can remediate those problems. Now, in this environment that we've got here, I've taken just a part of that complicated network that we saw before. And in this instance, what we've got, and what all those arrows are pointing at, is basically a managed box that we would put into your environment that has within it a software capability for the logging and monitoring of the logs that are sent to it from a variety of devices. And we could take logs from pretty much any device you can think of, most of the popularly used devices. There are mainstream, as Pedro says. There are a few anomalous devices that we can't take logs from, but mostly anything that can generate a log, or if it doesn't normally generate a log, we can put open source software on it that can give us log information that we can then take into our log management platform and allow us to be able to analyze that very simply. And again, when we start looking at remote offices, we are able to put out remote sensors that can then talk back to the main sensor that we would put into a head office environment and allow us to be able to show a clear picture to the customer of all of those devices. And if we go to the next stage, we are able to take the whole of the estate, bring it back to a single point, and be able to allow you as the customer to log in, to look at it purely as a security incident and event monitoring platform, but for us to be able to provide an analytical overlay on there to be able to review based upon a priority list that we will agree with you on those incidents and events as we see them.
Pedro, so are there different locations where the deployment occurs to bring all of those into one place? I understand that there's a lot of things to consider.
All right. Good morning. Before all, sorry about my voice. I'm running a bit under the weather. So at Exponential-e, in our plan at the moment is we are introducing SIM software on top of hardware on the box, and we are selecting the hardware, we're deploying servers above all for a reason of flexibility and try to reduce burden of both resources, people, and storage on your premises. So there's a multitude of deployments that we can incorporate. So the main and traditional way is to harbor one of our servers within your data centers or your main building or your head office, no matter what's the designation you give to it. And we can also deploy, for example, servers, physical servers as well, on remote offices. For example, your main office is in, I don't know, London, and you have like satellite offices in Glasgow or Cardiff or any other locations. We will traditionally deploy a remote sensor that will then feed the main server within your office in London.
Okay, so I guess that that covers a few of these points. And and it can actually cover with or without Exponential-e internet connectivity. So going into the monitored compliance, we're just going to speed up to finish this presentation. I'm aware that we're going a couple of minutes over now. How we approach monitored compliance is not only centralizing all of that visibility and control, but bringing extra analysts to look at that traffic in real time and to highlight the priorities and incidents which need action. So
I think the point I'd like to bring out here is this: when you're monitoring to compliance, there's no way you can take a shrink wrap solution off of a shelf and put it into a customer's environment. So each one of our engagements is bespoke in that we need to understand the management controls that are required for that compliance standard, and are bespoke in terms of the critical incidents and events that we take into priority, and how that priority works and how we communicate that priority back to you, the customer. It means that what you end up with is you end up with a range of services, which we're going to show in a second, that are all available to our customers, and the customer chooses which of those services they want, but they are bespoke to how the customer needs to use them. We also then offer the customer the ability to be able to look at the single pane of glass scene so that they can see exactly what's going on, the same as we do. But our analysts are actually providing the intelligence, if you like, behind whether or not what we see as a threat on that platform is a real threat, the incident priority based upon the conversations that we have with the customer, and the opportunity to discuss remediation techniques to be able to dispel that threat or breach.
Okay, so Pedro, can I ask you, how is the SOC set up? How is it built?
All right. So at the moment, at this stage, we tend to divide our roles in 3 different categories. So we're going to have the traditional analysts of level 1 and level 2 as the baseline of the SOC, our 24/7, 365 days ground force, if you want to call them that. So they're the more basic type of knowledge type of people. On top of them is going to be 2 teams, one of architects and one of SOC engineers. So the division between their roles is basically the architect will be on a very initial stage, talking with our customers, talking with our clients, to try to design the best deployment possible for their infrastructure, because every single client will have a different infrastructure or compliance regime. And that's the part where the architect will be most with the boots on the floor, basically, if you want to call it that. The engineer sides will be like the level 3 analysts that will support you with your solution, will support you with your mitigation, will support you to solve any issues of risk and incidents that analysts will raise during their 24/7 watch, if you want to call it that. So basically, the engineer will be the escalation that you can call upon if you have any doubts.
Okay.
So on the graphic that you see in front of you, all the services that you see that are in red and blue, so the blue over on the monitor compliance, the red on the rest of the services, are all part of the bundle that you get with our services. The monitor compliance, I've used 2 examples in there of PCI DSS and ISO 27001. It could be anything from SANS Top 20 right the way through to CAS-T if that was required.
That is missing there.
But where we're going to is really where you see the black lettering with the asterisks, because they're the services that we'll be rolling out in the not too distant future. But the main thing here is this: we provide this, if you like, as a box of sweets, and it's up to our customers which of those they use. We don't we have deliberately avoided going down the route of many of our competitors, where they start off with a base level SIEM service that they advertise and then build in cost for each one of the elements moving up the tree. Instead, we've taken the view, and I think it's the right view, that first of all, we base our service on the asset alone. So we don't deal with events per second, which is what you'll find a lot of SIEM platforms will offer. Because if you have an incident, strangely enough, the events per second go right through the roof. So we base it on the asset, and it doesn't matter what kind of asset it is. We don't make a distinction, but more importantly, we give all these services for the whole of the estate, and that is what differentiates us from a lot of others.
So with the advanced threat and malware services, there's threat detection, alerting, and monitoring. And that's on that's across the whole customer estate. It seeks out some, it's fair to say, existing untriggered threats, as well as vectors for an attack that could happen. And it's actually fair to say that not all malicious technology is advanced. It's potentially just taking advantage of the vulnerabilities that are unseen, and what some of our monitoring can do is identify those and raise them and maintain the compliance against them. So there's intrusion alerting as well. The alerting and monitoring service provides that ability to monitor the network at all times, and it's the key enabler to ensure customers are alerted to these attacks. I'll continue on to finish off this presentation. The fact of some of these monitoring services, it's part of our cybersecurity services portfolio. So as Pedro said, there's analysts, engineers, and architects in the CSOC, but that's together with the solutions and the consultants that are part of the cybersecurity team. We're able to put that into more detail and provides a range of different services, such as virtual CISO and ongoing monitoring. So I've got time for some questions, of course, because there did come a couple through on the chat. Apart from some of the technical issues, we had, how does this work for clouds? Would one of you guys be able to touch on how it works?
Yeah. So we can monitor it in almost any environment. That's the beautiful thing about this. So if you go back to one of the slides we had earlier, we sort of said, you know, it doesn't have to be on our network.
It's very flexible.
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't even have to be in our country. As long as it's got internet connectivity, we can get to it. We can put a device out there. Now, ordinarily, we like to use an Intel-based server that will deploy to the customer as a demarcation of the service. But just as easily, that could be, in the case of somewhere like
Virtual
cloud, it could be a virtual appliance. So we can provide a virtual appliance that can be spun up in an Amazon or Azure or wherever, or even in our own VDCs, and we can use that as a point to which all of the virtual devices could send their logs. They would then be forwarded on to the main monitoring device, wherever that might be, and that would allow a full view of the entire estate, both physical and virtual. And that's one of the great benefits of this type of service, is that, you know, when people put their dev into cloud, what they miss is the ability to be able to see what's happening with that dev when it does come under attack, or if somebody tries to do a port scan on it, or somebody tries to break it. Because there are loads of guys out there that are trying to do that stuff using automated tools now. So it's really quite important to be able to see under one pane of glass the whole of your estate and be able to drill down on it. And with the type of technology we're using, that makes it all very capable.
Okay. There was another question, which is, how is this part of the CSOC services, or is it monitoring? So I think part of that is clear in that we have these managed monitoring services, including the human analysis and the raising of priorities according to what customers need. But is that right, Jeff, that there's monitoring services as part of our full range of CSOC services?
Well, so let's break this down, because if you talk to people out in the marketplace, and I've been playing with these services for quite a few years now. When you talk to people out in the marketplace and you say, I have a cybersecurity operations center services that I'd like to talk to you about, in people's minds there are a number of different things they see.
Right.
Some of them think that what you're actually doing is you're turning into a gun for hire. So in other words, you're going to look just purely at their network, not do anything else, and just worry about analyzing their network all the time, based upon no real criticality, but just the fact that you're there as somebody to do stuff. And I've seen some boutique companies actually do that type of thing. I've also seen situations where people talk about SOC services or CSOC services being really just about providing a SIEM environment, so providing a security incident event monitoring platform with no real analytical assistance apart from just providing the tool. Yeah. But our view, our take on it is the services, the SIEM, if you like, the monitoring platform is a monitoring platform, and what we're selling is our ability to be able to interpret what comes out of that monitoring platform to provide advice and guidance to our customers.
Bear in mind that on top of the monitoring service of the normal SIEM, what we're trying to achieve here is kind of all the eggs inside the same basket. So not only the SIEM solution, we aim to provide live availability monitoring, ups and downs, for the services or the devices that are being monitored. We also intend on performing monthly or less vulnerability scans and respective support and how to fix problems that we found or find during our vulnerability scanning. And in the end, we are also going to incorporate on the SIEM solution IDS, intrusion detection system type of platform, attached or linked to a APT database or advanced persistent threat database that is being commonly shared with amongst all the other users. So basically, on a 15-minute basis, we're going to get live updates for anything that is seen on the wild. So I can't promise you, there's always the stigma of saying the zero-day exploit. I can't promise you identify zero-day exploits, but I probably will try to promise or provide you a quicker way to identify these problems.
Okay. Thanks very much to both of you today. I would like to finish off just by saying that achieving compliance requires a measured framework, and maintaining compliance requires continuous monitoring. So there's a range of services that we can help you understand and remediate a range of threats, but what we'd like to do is to take that into further detail with you in the future and address your priorities. For further information, you can email us at marketing@exponential-e.com. Thanks everyone for attending, and we'll be able to provide you with full information of today's presentation later. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers, bye.